Have mercy.
If you say yes,
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday, April 13th, 2021 Carteret County Board of Education meeting. I'm happy to have everybody here. I hope everybody had an incredible spring break. It is glorious outside, and I hope that is going to segue into a glorious week for us. We have got Miss Catherine Chadwick for our pledge and our invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Dear Lord, as we gather tonight at this meeting, we ask that you will be in our midst. Help us to be able to discuss the matters at hand in a reasonable way and make decisions that will be pleasing to you. God, let this meeting be productive and help us keep the children and you at the forefront of our decision. Let the work done here tonight be all for your glory. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Ms. Chadwick. First up on our agenda, we have got Ms. Heather Boston, Director of MTSS and AIG. She's going to recognize the students that were selected to attend the 2021 Governor's School.
They're shy.
Go across here, socially distanced as much as possible.
You have to walk all around 3 times.
Out there.
Don't pay attention to me, I'm sorry.
No, there's nothing to be sorry about. You did it perfect. All right. So I'm very excited to be here today. Each year, we are, as a school system, allowed to nominate students to apply for the North Carolina Governor's School. And this is a highly competitive 5.5-week summer program. Students may apply for academics or the arts. After submitting names at the local level, students are then given the opportunity to be presented before the state level selection committee, and they determine acceptance into Governor's School. Each year, we are given a large number of amazing students to review the applications of, and we are only allowed to send 6 for academic and 12 for the arts to go on to Governor's School to be presented before the Governor's School Board to be nominated. Approximately 30% of the students submitted to the Governor's School Board will be selected. This year, of the 9 students that this year we had 9 of our 13 students that we nominated selected, which is the largest number that we've had in any of the time that the AIG specialists or myself have been a member of this school system. So this is a huge kudos to the work that our high schools and our students are doing. I am so proud of these kids. They are incredible. We have students selected in all the designated areas. We have visual arts, instrumental arts, core music, and academics that were accepted this year. This is the strongest showing that we've had, and these are some of the most amazing students that we could ever ask for. I'm so proud to work with them. So we would like to present before you Audrey Kirkwood. If you want to go ahead and say hi.
Bad flip.
And Audrey is going for instrumental music. And Audrey is a sophomore. And this is the first time that I've had a sophomore be able to go, which is a huge honor.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We have Patrick Randall, and he is also going for instrumental music. We have Tindra Tramontano, and she is going for instrumental music. We have Colton Rodriguez, and he is going for natural sciences from Croatan High School. We have Steven Samoji, Croatan High School, natural sciences. We have Isabel Samsel from Croatan High School going for visual arts.
Apologies, I was placed in another room.
All right, we have Bella Counts going for English from West Carteret. And we have Noah Shaw going for Natural Sciences from Croatan High School. And so we just want to recognize them before the board because these are extraordinary students who worked extraordinarily hard to be some of the most competitive students in our state. They have shown their talent on the stage, in the classroom, and I'm very honored that I get to present them before you today.
Awesome. Let's go backwards and rotate this way. Take the line this way for me. Kind of separated. And then board members, if you'll stand up behind them, they'll be able to get a nice picture. Beautiful.
Don't smile.
Can't see it anyway.
Congratulations, Patrick. Nice job.
Good job, y'all.
Nice job. Well done. My wife taught English at government school.
Good job, Bella.
Where'd he go?
That's amazing. Very proud of those young people.
That's awesome.
Next, we have got Miss Allison Dees, Director of Career and Technical Education, to recognize the student that received the ProStart National Certificate of Achievement.
Good evening. I would like to have Josh Chikimiak come forward. And I'm also excited to present to you, would like to recognize Josh Chikimiak, a senior at Croatan High School that received the ProStart National Certificate of Achievement, or otherwise known as the COA. In order to be eligible for the National ProStart COA, a student must pass the National Registrant Association's Year 1 and Year 2 certification exam, complete a minimum of 400 hours of mentored work experience in the food service industry. Over the past 2 years, Josh has gained 800 hours of industry experience in our local restaurants. He has been a career and technical education student in the foods program since the fall of his freshman year. And in the fall, Josh plans to pursue his culinary AAS degree at Carteret Community College and then transfer to NC State to major in food services. And he is the first one in Carteret County ever.
Wow.
Stand right up here, and board members will do the same thing. If you want to stand up. We actually have Josh's actual national certificate of achievement, so we'll have you kind of face towards the podium, and then a certificate of recognition from Board of Education. We're incredibly proud of you, Josh.
Nice job.
Congratulations.
Get a good picture.
Good job, buddy.
Josh, where all did you work in the county?
I worked at Caribbean over at Emerald Isle, Floyd, and Moorhead. And then I volunteered at Public Institute in Moorhead City.
Wow. Good for you, man. That's
Yeah,
outstanding.
Great for you.
Really well done.
Congratulations.
All right, next up, I am going to read a resolution recognizing April as the month of the military child, and I'm reading this resolution for consideration by our board. April 2021, Month of the Military Child Proclamation. Whereas, since 1886, the Department of Defense has designated April as the month of the military child, recognizing the courage of military children. And whereas, the month of the military child is an opportunity to remember children's roles in strengthening the military family. And whereas, living in different states and countries and often moving numerous times, military children face unique challenges many other youth do not experience. And whereas 17% of the students who attend the Carteret County Public School System are declared as military dependents. And whereas Many of the parents and guardians of our students work at the area military bases, and whereas the Carteret County Public School System strives to provide a safe and nurturing educational environment for all children with additional support for military children. Now, therefore, we as the Carteret County Board of Education hereby proclaim April as the month of the military child, April 22nd as Purple Up Day, a day to wear purple to show support for military children. April 13th, 2021. Do I have a motion to consider this resolution?
So moved as a military child.
Reverend Goodwin has made a motion. Do I have a second?
I will second.
Ms. Chadwick has a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. It's unanimous. Very good. Thank y'all. Next, I will need a motion to consider approval of the meeting agenda. Do I have a
Mr.
motion?
Chairman,
Reverend Goodwin has made a motion. Do I have a second?
I need to,
Chairman,
I need to finish my
Reverend Goodwin's
sentence.
going to move to amend the consent agenda.
I move to amend the consent agenda to revise the bond project's architect's contract to include site engineering per the superintendent's submittal at our desk.
Mr. Reverend Goodwin has made a motion to amend the consent agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Day has seconded it. All in favor, raise your right hand. Very good. That is unanimous. Now we can move to approve the meeting agenda.
So moved.
So Reverend Goodwin has made the motion. Do I have a second?
We'll second that.
Ms. Wheatley has made the second. All in favor, raise your right hand. Very good. Done. Thank y'all. Now we will have a public forum, and Mr. Blair approach any public comments.
If I can approach, we've actually got another comment that was, they had signed up for prior to the meeting, and I'll be happy to let them go first if you would like.
Okay, perfect. Before we start, I'm going to read this about public comments. It is now time for public comment. Anyone present tonight wishing to make comment should have filled out a form, and as long as COVID social distancing restrictions are in place, we are also accepting written comments that will be at least partially read to the board, and the full text presented to the board if within the bounds of public comment. To ensure civility, relevance, and time management, there are specific requirements for public comment set forth in school board policy. They include comments are limited to matters pertaining to public education. The speaker shall state his or her name at the beginning of his or her comment. For mailing comments, the administrator reading the comment will identify the author. Speaking time will be limited to 3 minutes per person, including the reading of a mailing comment. Assistant Superintendent Richie Paler is our timekeeper. He will hold up a yellow card when the speaker has 30 seconds left and a red card when the time has ended. No speaker shall make obscene remarks or issue personal attacks or insults. No complaint against a school employee or student will be permitted, although this may be heard in closed session at a later date following consultation with the superintendent. Much information about individual students, including a speaker's own child, is confidential under state and federal law, and we discourage and often prohibit such information in open session. The chairperson may immediately terminate any comments that violate these rules. Board members will not respond to questions except occasionally to request clarification. With that introduction, our first speaker tonight is Ms. Taylor Statham and Mr. Ryan Kolowitz.
Hello, everyone. My name is Taylor Statham, and we'd like to thank you so much for having us here. This is Ryan McAllowitz, and recently we decided to start up the student-to-student program at our high school, Croatan High School. For those of you who don't know, Student-to-Student is a program that brings military and civilian students together to welcome new students, create a positive environment, support academic excellence, and ease transitions. When we think of the military, the thought that often comes to mind are the brave people that fight for our country. But in April, we are reminded of the sacrifices that all military-connected persons must make, not simply those on the front line. The children of our armed forces give up so much in a lifestyle that they didn't even choose, moving away from their home and their friends, as well as the deployment of a parent keeping them apart. In our county alone, there are roughly 600 students with one or more parents in the military. Fortunately, there are ways that we can aid them and their adjustment. The student-to-student program is perhaps the most effective of these. Ryan is a military kid, and he'll tell you how this has impacted him in his life.
Hello, everyone. I moved here from the DC area in the summer of 2018, the summer before my freshman year. On my first day, I only knew one other person at the school. To put it simply, my day was terrible. But there was one highlight of that day that I remember. There was this one girl that sat in front of me in my first period class. She was super social and seemed to know a lot of people at the school. She turned around and asked if we had any other classes together. We had second period art together downstairs. We walked down the stairs together, and because we had similar last names, we ended up sitting next to each other in that class. She ended up inviting me to her birthday party a few months later. Now she's one of my best friends. This is the power of reaching out, and that's why I was so opening to helping Taylor establish a student-to-student club at Croatan. And why I think it's so important to help students form connections with others, because if she never reached out, I'm not sure where I would be today. Student to student makes sure no kid sits alone, each kid has equal opportunity, and helps new students become a part of their community. Student to student is super important, and we are excited to bring this opportunity to our school. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Good.
I want to commend you both for taking initiative to start this, because you never know what that one contact will do. So, I mean, obviously, we just heard from you, and it made an impact on you. But for children moving in and out of schools, it can be really, really difficult. So I applaud you both for, taking a stand and doing something about it. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, thank y'all so much. All right, Mr. Probst.
All right, I have two for you. A note of thanks from Lucy Bond, Morehead City. I would like to applaud Principal Mr. Joe Paletti and teachers, especially Stacy Kyle, for working together to bring diversity awareness and appreciation training to students and staff at Westcott High School this spring. Building relationships in a safe, inclusive work environment to accelerate productivity, to encourage self-leadership, and to reach higher levels of excellence and achievement sound like admirable goals for any organization, especially for schools where the well-being of every single human being is important. It sounds like character building to me. It also sounds like part of Carteret County Schools' mission and a promise to all its students. That is what this training was about: becoming self-aware, developing ways to relate to others, and practicing diversity inclusion. The school funded part of the training, but Ms. Kyle reached out to other individuals and groups in the community for money to support the educational opportunity. She was kind enough to share the training objectives with us, and many contributors were pleased to give for the sake of education, for the sake of learning new skills and polishing up on old ones too. In the words of the trainer, create a community of people who are authentic, committed, sensitive, and clear. It takes great insight and understanding to learn that sometimes judgments we make about others are based on misinformation and prejudices. As a representative of the citizens of diversity in education, I support the idea of funding this training and expanding it to other schools in our county. What greater staff development goals could you hope for than to have teachers who want to improve their profession, initiate positive change, build strong connections with students and families, and create a positive school culture that benefits everyone? Will you support funding for staff development that embraces the appreciation of diversity and inclusion? Thank you for your time and for all that you do in service to our students and staff. Lucy Bond, Citizens of Diversity in Education Advocate. Okay. The second one comes from Stephanie Kirsch. To the men and women of the Board of Education, I am speaking on behalf of all children needing a face covering exemption, requesting in-person schooling. The updated Strong Schools North Carolina Toolkit follows Governor Cooper's recent executive order lessening the COVID-related restrictions in our state. Strong Schools North Carolina Toolkit states on page 9, as outlined in Executive Order number 163, face coverings are not required to be worn by an individual who, with emphasis, should not wear a face covering due to any medical or behavioral condition or disability, including but not limited to any person who has trouble breathing, or unconscious or incapacitated, or is otherwise unable to put on or remove the face covering without assistance. Strong Schools North Carolina Toolkit states on page 19, ensure that all students ages 5 and older and all teachers, staff, and adult visitors wear face coverings when they are on a bus or other transportation vehicle, with emphasis unless the person or family member for a student states that an exemption applies. The toolkit's mere mention of the exemption necessitates the recognition of the need of exemptions and therefore the approval of face covering exemptions. According to Ms. Terry Brett, she was directed by Mr. Blair Probst to relay our county's position on face covering exemptions. None will be granted at this time, possibly with more information, paraphrasing based on a phone conversation. My public comment is that some of our children require face covering exemptions, and for some of our children, virtual schools is not an adequate accommodation. While the specific needs of the children I am speaking on behalf are protected under HIPAA, some conditions mentioned on an ADA website list the following: asthma, COPD, respiratory disabilities, PTSD, anxiety, claustrophobia, autism, sensory processing disorder, and cerebral palsy. That is not an exhaustive list. Sincerely, Stephanie Kirsch.
Blair, can you speak more to this? I'm just curious. What is the scoop on exemptions? No exemptions are.
That's not the case.
Okay.
And I will say, I assume this is appropriate to say, I will say that I've had a conversation this afternoon with this individual, and that was not the case.
Thank you.
Thank you, Blair. All right, moving right along. Next, we're going to need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Make that motion.
Ms. Statler has made the motion. Do I have a second?
I will second.
Ms. Wheatley has seconded. All in favor, raise your hand. That's unanimous. The consent agenda has passed. Wonderful. We are moving on to globally competitive students. That will be Dr. Jackson.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I love any meeting where we start off having the opportunity to recognize our students. That was absolutely special as we heard that more students than anyone who currently works in the system were selected for governor's school, at least in their memory. And then to have a student become the first student in the entire county to earn a national certification, absolutely incredible. And then to step beyond that and have two students step forward who, through their own initiative and creativity, saw a need and addressed it. That's what this is all about. We could stop right now in this moment and feel like we've had a great night, at least I have, and I very much appreciate each of our students throughout the school system and the men and women who serve them. I'm so very proud of all that I see. I recognize that a program like Student to Student occurs when students can be together, and we're very proud of the fact that in our school system, we're able to operate under Plan A so that our high school students can attend school 4 days a week, and we very much appreciate the advocacy of this board and others in our county to bring that to fruition. As we started a 6-hour meeting at the very beginning of this year, we didn't know where we would wind up as we got past spring break. Plan A was just something we were hoping for. And now I'm able to give you an update of how Plan A has worked and is working in our school system. And I do want to give credit to all of those who spoke out for our children and recognized the need for our students, young men and women, young children to be able to be together. And so I'm very excited to give you an opportunity to review our implementation of Plan A to date. First of all, just as background information, as we begin to look at Plan A, I want to give you current virtual numbers. These numbers are as of today. The principals all verified the numbers, and this is looking at the actual numbers of students in each school who've selected to be 100% virtual. And so on this first slide, we're looking at our elementary schools. As you'll recall, we were one of the first school districts in the state to allow our elementary schools to transition to Plan A, thanks to your leadership. Our elementary schools have been in school 5 days a week since October 18th, 2020, with the one exception following the winter break where the Board of Education allowed for a bit of a bubble for remote learning to get past that post-winter holiday potential spike that we wound up seeing. And so we appreciate that. At this moment, I do want to highlight the work of our elementary school principals and administrators, our teachers, our counselors, our nurses. Because of their incredible work, starting in October 18th, we were able to successfully advocate for our middle schools and high schools to move to Plan A. Had they not done all that work, had they not been the pioneers and the trailblazers and gone first and done such a great job, we may not be where we are now with our middle schools and high schools. And so I greatly appreciate their hard work. Looking at in elementary schools, we're at approximately 9% of our students who are taking advantage of 100% virtual learning. At our middle schools, you'll see that the numbers run between 11% to 18% in each of our 5 middle schools for a overall percentage at the middle school level of approximately 15% of our students taking advantage of 100% virtual learning. At the high school level, that percentage is higher. It's 24% across the school system for high schools. Almost 600 students are taking advantage of the 100% virtual learning. We have heard anecdotally that students have been taking advantage of the opportunity to work and have come to appreciate that paycheck, some families depending on that paycheck. And certainly things beyond just the pandemic may be going into some of that decision making, but approximately 24% or 1/4 of our high school students are taking advantage of virtual learning. You'll see at the high school level that ranges from 22% to 40%. The highest is at our early college. One of the drivers in that number is that the community college made the decision to transition more of its classes to online learning for the second semester. As you'll recall, they were making those decisions right at the highest peak of the case count, and I'm sure that drove some of that decision making. The high schools have been on Plan A now for 2 weeks. They had a week and almost a second full week right before spring break. Our middle schools are actually in their first full week this week on Plan A. They started the week before spring break, and you'll recall that Friday was actually a teacher work day as we were preparing for the Easter weekend and the spring break. And so at this point, they've been operating the middle schools. They're in their second week. The high schools are in their third week. And so looking at the district by level, you can see our elementary schools are at 9% virtual learners, the middle schools at 15%, the high schools at 24%. Bridges Academy, of course, a very, very small schools at 38%. And then overall in the school system, we're at approximately 15%, 1,183 students, about 1,200 students. That certainly informs our planning for next school year. We don't know what that number will be next school year because we don't know exactly where we're going to be in terms of with the COVID-19. We know that vaccine distribution has been going well, especially recently. It's been opened up to all adults 16 and older, and we certainly appreciate that. And I'll pause here to say how much I appreciate our county commissioners advocating for the vaccine distribution for our staff members. I had the opportunity to attend the mass clinic the county offered for our school system men and women. And on Friday during spring break, we had our second vaccine shot, and we were very grateful and appreciate all those who made that happen for us. And so as we go into next school year, we'll need to ask the question of parents as we plan for what virtual might look like, what that number will be. Now, I hope it's significantly less because we've seen students struggling in virtual learning. Not every student is successful working only on the computer. And so there'll be some instructional decisions to make. And I'll mention to the board, we'll have the opportunity to talk about instruction in the 2021-2022 year during our areas of oversight committee meetings and then at our May meeting as well. So we'll get deep into what teaching and learning looks like in the coming year.
Dr. Jackson, can I interrupt you just for a second?
Please.
That's got to be incredibly difficult for the administration to plan. So would we ask for a commitment if they choose to go virtual? And I know that's probably still in the works, but I assume we would ask for.
Yes, sir. So it's early on, but it's absolutely a part of the planning process, considering things like, and again, we're just throwing things against the wall at this point, trying to make sense of what makes the most sense. That if a parent wanted to select virtual learning, that they would select it for perhaps a semester, that they wouldn't be moving back and forth, because we have had some families in limited numbers, but who would go virtual for a week and then come back, and we'd hear rumors that maybe they were taking advantage of family trips and that sort of thing. And so I would think we'd want to have some sort of commitment for some amount of time, and then absent some sort of executive order from the state level, We may even want to put parameters around who could take advantage of virtual learning. For example, if a student's not being successful in virtual learning this year, we may want to put a requirement in that they need to attend face-to-face, because we certainly want all of our students to be successful. And if that methodology isn't working for them, then we may want to require them to come to face-to-face. But again, we don't know if the state will put rules in place around what we must do. And so we'll be prepared, as always, to follow those state rules. But we're beginning that planning process. Thank you. Going forward and looking at our weekly case counts, as the board knows, we've been sharing this weekly case count number every Friday on our website. I'm very proud of the fact that we've shared more information than most school systems, and we've done so in a very transparent fashion, sharing on the website where cases happened by school, using 3 levels of communication when those cases happened. We've tried our very best to be just as open as possible with the communication. I'm extremely grateful that we have seen a significant downturn in the cases, particularly as we've moved to Plan A. And so certainly it makes sense. The data is showing that the decision was well made. And so a little easier perhaps than seeing each of the weeks. You'll notice this goes from the start of the school year till actually last week. We did have 3 cases last week while we were on spring break. But we counted those because we needed to. But to really look at it and capture it, I've put together this graphic today. This is our monthly case count. And so you'll see during the months of this, December, January, and February, we had our highest 3 months with 45, 41, and 44. And then the month of March, which is fully concluded at this point, which was actually a long month, 31 days, we only had 14 cases after having 3 straight months of 45 cases. And so we really appreciate that downturn in the number of cases. And as the summer months are upon us, and as the vaccine distribution continues to roll out, we look forward to those numbers continuing to go down. And so we are seeing the numbers go down, and we appreciate that. We have not seen well, I don't want to say that yet. We'll see how this week goes. You know, we did just have a holiday, but it seems to be we're in a much better place than we have been post other holidays. And so looking at turning our attention to actual operations under Plan A, I wanted to share with the board just at a kind of high level how we're operating under Plan A. I won't continue to go over things we've gone over in the past, but be happy to answer any questions. At the elementary school level, as I mentioned, we have been operating 5 days per week. One operational unique characteristic at the elementary school level was our ability to utilize exclusive virtual teachers. And so what that means is that a teacher either teaches face-to-face or teaches virtually. And that certainly is extremely helpful because the virtual teacher is really able to focus on those virtual teachers. Now, you notice I put an asterisk there, and that was based on some feedback from teachers who shared, well, that's true, but, and there's always a but in something. And the but piece is the quarantine piece. And so when a student is quarantined, they become virtual, but we're not transferring that student to a virtual teacher only 2 weeks later to transfer them back to their face-to-face teacher. And so our face-to-face teachers will have virtual responsibilities as a student is quarantined. And then when the student returns from quarantine, comes back to face-to-face class. And so we certainly don't want to minimize any of the incredibly hard work that our teachers and staff members are doing. At our middle school level, you'll see that we're operating 4 days a week. Again, we're just in our second week, and I can tell you 2 weeks in, we are feeling very good about the operation of our middle schools under Plan A. Most teachers, unlike at the elementary school level, most teachers in our middle schools are teaching both virtually and face-to-face. So they have students who are 100% virtual and students who are face-to-face. Again, with that asterisk, because a student could be face-to-face, quarantined, and then becomes virtual for a short amount of time. At the middle schools, the board did allow us to continue remote learning Wednesdays. The middle school principals have emphatically and enthusiastically requested that we continue with our remote learning Wednesdays. Those remote learning Wednesdays give our teachers the opportunity to really focus on our 100% virtual students. And you saw the numbers for our middle schools earlier and how many students that is. And so the work just to plan the lessons for students who are face-to-face, students who are face-to-face but quarantined, or virtual students takes quite a bit of time. And having that remote learning Wednesday certainly helps our middle schools. As you know, following this week, we'll have just 6 weeks left of our school year. And so we're right here towards the end of the year and the final 6 weeks of the school year. And so the middle schools have really asked to continue to operate as they're operating, and certainly appreciate the board's really honoring that request at our previous meeting when the board authorized Plan A for the middle schools. As we go into the high schools, our high schools, just like all of our schools across the system, but our high schools in particular, are extremely unique. They're unique in size, they're unique in location and geographic considerations. They're unique in resources. The way that funding works in the state of North Carolina is that funding is generated by students. And so when you have more students, you have more funding. So you have more teachers because you have more students, and all that makes perfect sense. But it also means that each school, particularly at the high school level, has to work very hard, very creatively to put together a plan that works for that school, for that community. And I'm extremely proud of our 4 high schools. They've each worked very hard to craft a plan that works for their students, to help their students be successful, and that works for the staff members as well, to ensure that we're doing our very best job with all of our students. Starting with Croatan High School, and so unlike the elementary and middle school levels, I'm going to work through each of the high schools individually. Croatan High School is operating on a schedule that starts at 7:50 in the morning and goes until 2 p.m. They're working 4 days a week. Many of their teachers are teaching both virtually and face-to-face. Their teachers are teaching 3 blocks per day, which is a traditional teaching assignment for the high school level. They're using their 5th period at the end of their day for enrichment and remediation. They are using remote learning Wednesdays and using that also for remediation and for enrichment. They're using that time for planning, professional development, working very hard there. And so when we look at, and I'm mentioning the minutes because it'll become more apparent in just a few moments, for them, for Croatan High School, for our Cougars, they're using an 80-minute class period. 4 days a week gives them 320 minutes per week in that class face-to-face. And so things seem to be going really well at Croatan High School. At East Carteret High School, again, unique. It's the smallest of our traditional high schools. Their schedule starts at 8 a.m. and they go until 2:15 p.m. They're working 4 days a week. As you know, they're in their 3rd week now on Plan A, where we've had, in some cases, some teachers teaching both, some cases teaching most. At East Carteret, it's almost every teacher who is teaching both virtual students and face-to-face students. And again, based on number of teachers available, based on the size of the school. There, the teachers are teaching 3 blocks per day. Again, more of the traditional model in terms of teaching assignment. They are using the 5th period for enrichment and remediation. And then for them, they have something they call Workday Wednesdays that they're extremely passionate about. I had a wonderful conversation with Principal Westbrook about how they use their Workday Wednesdays. From 8 to 12 on Wednesday, they are providing bus transportation and they have meals, but they're using the Workday Wednesdays to support students. They have tutoring opportunities and provide learning opportunities for students. And I should have said they're doing similar things at Croatan as well, and we appreciate that. They also have 80-minute class periods, 4 days a week, and so 320 minutes per day or per week in each individual class, and are doing extremely well. Both Croatan and East Carteret are recommending to continue Plan A operations as they've been moving forward. At our early college, Mast Early College, of course, a unique situation. Again, the smallest of all of our schools at the high school level. Their day starts at 8 o'clock and goes till 3:15. It's 4 days a week. Unlike the rest of the school system on a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday schedule, they're on a Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday schedule because Friday is a day that typically college classes don't meet. And so that made the most sense for Mast. And so we were delighted to be able to honor that request on the part of Mast. All of their teachers teach both virtually and face-to-face. You'll remember earlier I said they had the highest percentage of students who were taking advantage of virtual learning. And Mr. Johnson, the principal there, does believe that that's really driven by the number of community college classes that are online for this semester. And so that's certainly a part of that. The teachers are teaching 3 blocks per day. They also use that 5th period for enrichment and remediation for their college classes and for their core classes. They have a 75-minute class period times 4 days a week, which is 300 minutes per week in their classes. And then moving finally alphabetically to West Carteret High School. West Carteret High School is using a schedule that they've termed the super block schedule. They worked very hard to create a schedule to take advantage of the opportunity to be innovative during the pandemic. And so they use a schedule that starts at 8 a.m. and goes till 12 p.m. 4 days per week. At 12 p.m., the super block starts. At West Carteret, they have few teachers. I believe the number was 6, Mr. Paletti shared with me, who are serving both 100% virtual students and face-to-face students. Again, because it's a larger school, you have more teachers teaching each subject area. There, though, the teachers teach 4 blocks a day. Typically, that would be 3 blocks a day as opposed to 4. And so the creativity was the teachers agreed to teach 4 blocks a day, which allowed for this operation of this super block. The blocks themselves are 60 minutes, but the super block gives an opportunity for focused remediation and test preparation, opportunities for engagement through clubs and interest groups, credit recovery, guest speakers, life skills, ACT prep, freshman orientation, office hours for the teachers to meet with students, and common planning. And so in their super block schedules, I've had the opportunity to visit during the super block. It's quite crowded. Lots of students taking advantage of that super block, which is exactly what the leadership team said would happen when I met with the leadership team early in the school year. And so looking at West Carteret High School, their minutes per day, per week, per class right now at 60 minutes times 4 days is 240 minutes per week per class. West Carteret High School would like to request that the board allow them to attend school 5 days a week. And so at 5 days a week times that 60 minutes, that brings their number of minutes per week in class to 300 minutes per week, which is the same as we have at Mast and very close to what we have at East Carteret and Croatan. And so we have similar offerings at all 4 schools in terms of number of minutes in class. And we certainly want to be mindful of that. And that's certainly a recommendation that I support. And so we'll have an opportunity to take a look and let the board deliberate on that if you'd like. But just looking at all 4 of our high schools, Croatan minutes per week in an individual class, and East are at 320, Mast and West, if approved for the 5 days, would be on the super block schedule, would be at 300. I do want to emphasize that all 4 of the high schools have really gone overboard with additional opportunities for mediation and enrichment, whether that's bringing students in after school, finding ways to offer transportation, providing meal service, using those Wednesdays to bring students in. They've really done everything they can. You know that our failure rate was higher than we wanted it to be the first quarter, but that improved significantly in the second quarter and has gotten even better as we've gone through the years. Teachers are getting better at what they're doing. Students are becoming more engaged, and we're doing everything we can to move forward. Continuing to look at Plan A operations, Mr. Probst and I got together today, and our best estimate right now is about 65% of our employees are somewhere in the receiving a vaccine process. Either they've gotten 1 shot or 2 shots. We'll have a better number closer to the end of the year, because once they finish with both shots, we ask that they share their vaccine card with the school nurse, or for those who don't work in a school, we share ours with Mr. Probst, so that we have that information. Of course, we keep that confidential as it is employee health information, but having that information helps us should we have a situation where we need to look at the possibility of quarantines or not being able to quarantine. And so we don't have a good number yet. Certainly, it's not a requirement of our staff members to receive a vaccine. It's an option, just like it is for anyone else in our county. And so we appreciate those who've decided that's what they would like to do. We have an opportunity to make a change to our health and wellness protocol. We don't approach any potential changes in a cavalier fashion. We really approach those in a very mindful fashion. Mr. Probst has had multiple meetings with our nurses considering this potential possible change for the board to consider tonight, and all the nurses or as a group have supported this change, and I certainly support it as well. But we don't bring a change to you having not really done our homework on the change and the potential implications of the change. And so on the March 24th Strong Schools North Carolina Toolkit update, as you'll recall, the document that guides our work this year, they did make a change in the health and wellness protocol. And they said that families should continue to conduct home-based symptom screening for students following typical school policies. Families should keep their children home when they're sick, and those aren't changes. They recommend that families refer children to diagnostic testing who may have symptoms of COVID-19. The change, though, comes with that 4th bullet. North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services does not recommend daily COVID-19 symptom screening for all students at school entry. And so, as you know, since we started school way back in August, every single day, we've taken the temperature of every child getting onto a school bus and a temperature of every person walking into the building, both children and adults. We've continued that in all of our buildings up to this moment. You probably had your temperature check, I hope, as you came in this evening as part of entering the building. And so that opportunity is now before us to pause our symptom screening at each of our schools. And certainly if we felt like at some point it needed to return, we could go back and bring that back in. The toolkit does go on to say schools should follow their typical procedures for exclusion as they would for any type of illness if a child is symptomatic at school. The toolkit does give the option for school districts to continue symptom screening for adults or for staff members. So we could continue to take temperatures of staff members. We could continue to ask the COVID-19 questions as folks arrive at the building. And so as we come to the opportunity for you to ask any questions or have any conversation you'd like to have, I'd like to end the formal presentation with, again, a recommendation. It feels like I've done quite a few of these as we've gone through this year and worked through this year. This evening, as allowed by the governor after working with our principals and seeking feedback from our school system nurses and the cabinet staff, it is my recommendation to the Board of Education that Plan A operations be revised to, one, allow West Carteret High School to operate face-to-face 5 days per week. That would start with your approval next Monday, which is the date that the school asked for, to have similar face-to-face class time as the other high schools, and that all entry point screenings for students and adults be halted beginning April 19th, 2021. And so it'd be my recommendation both those changes would go into effect on Monday. And so, Mr. Chair, this concludes the presentation. Be happy to answer any questions or entertain any motions the board may have.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Any questions?
One quick typo I noticed, West Carter goes till 12:30 instead of 12. But anyway, I'd very much like to support your recommendation on both counts. So I think it sounds good.
Any other questions or comments?
I move we endorse it, whatever we need to do.
Reverend Goodwin has made a motion to endorse Dr. Jackson's recommendation. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Mr. Day has seconded this. All in favor, raise your right hand. It is unanimous. That has passed. Thank you, Dr. Jackson.
Thank you, board members.
Perfect. Now we have Dr. Jackson.
Thanks, board members. Good to see you this evening. Tonight, I am really excited to share with you one of the, as we've worked through the pandemic, and that is all-consuming, we've also tried to be very thoughtful about all of our operations and continue to improve. My favorite boss I ever worked with said that we should always autograph our work with excellence, which means we do everything to the best of our ability. And so this evening, I want to share with you an update to our policy manual. The update was made to make it as transparent and as easy to operate for the citizens of Carteret County and beyond, and particularly for our board members and staff members as well. And so Mr. McKay has pulled up our school system website just to give everyone an indication of where to find our board policy. As he scrolls down, you'll see a link on the left. I'll let him go there for policy manual. If we click on the policy manual, instead of what we had before, which was a long list of hyperlink of policies, we now have this hosted policy manual. It's hosted by the North Carolina School Boards Association. This is actually our Carteret County Public Schools policies as approved by this board. One of the things I like about the policy manual as it's now hosted is that each of the chapters are separated out by the colors on the left, and we'll take a look at that in just a moment. My favorite feature, of course, in the center are directions in case folks aren't quite sure how to operate it. But my favorite part of the entire thing is the search bar. And so if you've ever had some situation come up, board members, where you just want to know what policy says, if you go into the search bar and type any term, for example, Mr. McKay, maybe field trips, or any term that you may be thinking about, you actually type that in and hit enter. what it does, and again, this is live on our website, is it actually pulls up every policy and then circles where those words appear in the policy. So you can see every mention of field trips in our school system policy manual. If he clicks on any of those policies, Mr. McKay, once you go to the policy, it actually circles and highlights those words again. So in some of our policies, as you know, they can be quite lengthy. You can find exactly where they are. And so I do appreciate that search feature and the opportunity to click right through the policies. And so if we go back to the home of the policy manual, we'll click on the house, back to the front again, and choose a chapter, Mike, maybe the students chapter. If we go to any of the chapters, when we click on the chapter, it'll actually pull up all the policies in the chapter, give you the name of the policy, a hyperlink to the actual policy by number. And then to the far right, you'll see that it shares whether or not that's a policy or a regulation. And so if we click on any of those policy numbers, and I'll let you choose one, Mr. McKay, you'll actually see the policy. In the policy itself, after the policy, this happens to be a short one, focus on students. It is what we're focused on, so it can be pretty short policy. But you'll see the legal references, and those are hyperlinked throughout the document. So if you want to go actually to the general statute, you can click right on it, you can find it. There's also cross-references. As you know, many of our policies actually cross-reference to other policies, and so there's a hyperlink to any of those policies that are cross-referenced. And so whether it's a board member, a staff member, or someone in the community who's really looking for information on our policies, it's become very easy to find those policies and very user-friendly. The adoption date, the revision date are also there. In the top left, it's small on the screen, but there's options to actually pull that down as a Word document or a PDF document, to print it, or to actually get the link to that direct policy. And so if someone wanted to send that, if you were communicating with a constituent about a particular policy, you could actually just send the link by clicking on that button. And so we'll go back to the home of the policy manual, Mike. And again, we're very excited to have it now hosted through our website. Again, we go directly from the website, click on policy manual, and it takes us here, and it's pretty self-explanatory, pretty easy to use. And so I wanted to take a moment this evening just to highlight that to the Board of Education and to allow all of our staff and community members to know that that's there. Of course, anytime we talk about policy, we do need to highlight Mr. Propst's work and Mr. Whitford's work, because we'd have nothing to host if they weren't working so hard to make sure those policies were written correctly and that they met all the statutory requirements. So we certainly appreciate both of them. This concludes the presentation, Mr. Jenkins, unless any board members have any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Any comments or questions?
That search bar might be the greatest single accomplishment regarding policy
Amen.
since I've been involved. It's awesome. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up is Mr. Probst.
I don't use the search button because I know them all by heart anyway.
And we know you do.
So speaking of policy, I only have second read for you tonight, and these policies come from the North Carolina School Board Association Fall 2020 update packets. A lot of them are just editorial changes, as well as some changes with some state laws that have some requirements that needed to be edited as well. There were no changes from the first read, so I don't really have anything else to share. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Probst?
I should have asked when Dr. Jackson was up, but can you explain for us real quick the difference in that policy manual? We have policy and regulations.
Sure. Policies are adopted by the board. Regulations or administrative rules that are set out by the superintendent and the administration. Not necessarily have to be required to be adopted by the board.
Thanks.
I will say this, that when we do make changes to the regulations, we do bring it to your attention for informational purposes.
Any other comments or questions? Fantastic.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the policies for second read as presented.
Mr. McLean has made a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Reverend Goodwin is on fire tonight with the second. All in favor, raise your right hand. This is unanimously.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Thank you, Mr. Probst. Great job. All right, next up is Ms. Carswell.
Good evening. I'd like to present budget revision number 8 The total amount for this budget revision is $600,392.90. The first part of the budget revision is the state fund. The first line item of the state budget revision is for a reduction to the classroom teaching positions due to the true-up of classes with North Carolina Virtual Public School. We are reduced in the beginning of the year. Our classroom teaching positions are reduced by 75% of the classes that we participated in the previous year. And then March, April timeframe, then they true that up based on what we have actually used for that year. And another small reduction in this same line item is for the new teacher orientation, where we paid 3 days for the new teachers to take the new teacher orientation. The second item is to appropriate the funds for the digital learning grant in the amount of $50,000. The third item is to appropriate or record the reimbursement for the state for substitutes, and this is for January and February. The next item is to appropriate funds received from the textbooks for non-state adopted textbooks and digital resources in the amount of $41,197. And the final line item is a transfer of CTE months of employment to CTE instructional supplies. The next budget revision, the Federal Fund 3. The first item is to appropriate gear funds received for EC services. The second is appropriate gear funds received for health services. The third item is to appropriate gear funds received for improving instruction. That's a total amount of $368,728. The Special Revenue Fund budget amendment is appropriating additional funds received for the NC Pre-K program in the amount of $30,170.90. And again, the total budget revision is $600,392.90. Any questions?
Any comments? Great job, Ms. Cardwell.
Thank you.
We need a motion to consider this budget revision.
So moved.
Ms. Wheatley has made a motion.
I'll second.
Ms. Chadwick has seconded. All in favor, raise your right hand. Unanimous. Very good. Very good. Good job. All right, next up, we have got a review of the ESSER funds. Dr. Jackson.
Thank you, board members. And if I may, I should have earlier, I want to recognize Principal Zimmerino, who's here this evening. Anytime we have our principals with us, I want to take a moment to say thank you to them. I've had the opportunity to spend quite a bit of time with Ms. Zimmerino beyond just being in the schoolhouse. The teams at Croatan have done incredibly well, and so we actually had the opportunity to go close to the state's capital, cheer on the soccer team as they won a state championship, and we'll look forward to recognizing the soccer team next month. I can tell you that of all the people who were at the state championship, it was very clear every time Ms. Zimmerino cheered because she was the loudest there. And I very much appreciate that. And she was that way for every single sport so far this year, including football last week when East Carteret played Croatan. I spent the first half on the East Carteret side and the second half on the Croatan side. And the side I was on tended to not do so well that half, so I may be banned from going to further East Carteret Croatan football games. But I do appreciate Ms. Zimmerino and all of her colleagues, particularly at the high school level, for all the many, many nights they put into supporting our students in all of their activities, whether that's band, music, chorus, drama, athletics, etc. Thank you for that opportunity to recognize her. This evening, we have the opportunity to take a look at our ESSERS fund. We're certainly not asking for any decisions unless the board would like to make a decision around ESSERS funding. However, it is an opportunity for the staff to hear from the board because we do have a very short time frame for our ESSERS 2 budget. We've just received that from the state. It's an incredibly quick quick turnaround. And so we're working with principals and staff to allow them to share with us those things that they believe we should be funding with these ESSER funds. And so I wanted to give the Board of Education that same opportunity to share anything that you may want to share this evening as we prepare that budget for your consideration at the May meeting. And again, I apologize for that quick turnaround. Unfortunately, that was given to us. Thank you, Mike. And so on this screen, this is actually the information we shared with the county commissioners when we had the opportunity to address them about a month and a half ago. We have received significant COVID funding beginning last year as we were ending one year coming into this year. That funding was needed because we certainly have had many, many, many expenses we've never had before. Things like thermometers to take temperatures and personal protective equipment for students and staff members and tape on the floors to mark how far we had to stand apart and just scads of stuff that we needed. And so we appreciate the money that we've received. Under the federal funds, you'll see in that top box, and I apologize for that being a little small for this. Again, this is just kind of a historical reminder. You'll see the ESSERS 1 funding. We received just over $1.6 million in ESSERS 1 funding, and that went for things like digital resources, purchasing equipment for our students and staff, for contract nurses, and we certainly appreciate, by the way, having those nurses this year. That was an incredible decision. We have certainly needed them at all of our schools, and so we appreciate that funding provided for those contract nurses so that we could have the number we had. There's also some funding in digital curricula and then for the learning management system. In addition to the ESSERS funding, we also received other funding. CRF funding was the coronavirus relief funding. There was funding for summer learning for last summer, the summer of 2020. There was some health support funding, non-digital resources, student computers, school nutrition, personnel computers, exceptional children, cybersecurity, PPE funding. We also had some COVID-19 supplemental funds. And then the GEAR funding actually came from the governor. There was money that was sent to the governor to also send to school systems and counties. And so the GEAR funding is that funding that flowed to us from the governor's office for student health and supplemental services. And so you'll see that that's $3.3 million. And that funding has primarily been spent as we've gone through this year. But just to give you an idea of the funding that we had received, and we certainly needed it. As we move forward, we've actually we're up to ESSERS 3. We did not know to expect ESSERS 1, and we're all the way up to ESSERS 3. And so I'll step through these and kind of give you an idea of where we are with each of these funding pots. So ESSERS 1 is $1.6 million. That's the money you just saw on the previous screen that we've used this year. That money has to be encumbered by September 30th, 2022. And again, that money is primarily spent, and I believe will be spent by the end of this school year. Pretty close, Ms. Carswell. Yeah, pretty close. ESSERS 2 funding, we've received the planning allotment for ESSERS 2 funding. That's the budget that we're actually working on now and will bring to the Board of Education for your consideration at the May meeting. The ESSERS 2 budget is actually due to DPI on May 9th. And so we're required to give that ESSERS fund budget or send that ESSERS 2 budget into them. Those funds must be encumbered by September 30th, 2023. So you'll see there's some time to spend that money. It's a significant pot of money. That's actually $6.1 million in ESSERS 2 funding. As we look at these big numbers, though, it's certainly worthwhile to take a moment to recognize what these funds are for. The funds are actually to meet the needs that have been created during the pandemic. Our students haven't been able to go to school 5 days a week, and so they haven't been with their teachers 5 days a week, and we need to address that. And so that's what these funds are for, to actually look at where our students are and how can we help our students, how can we make sure that they move forward and can be successful. ESSERS 3, we've now received the draft planning allotment. So it's out in front of us, and we now know what that number is, but we're not to the point of actually receiving the planning allotment or having to generate that budget. But certainly we need to be aware of that. That ESSERS 3 draft planning allotment is $13,835,294. And so we're looking at $20 million in ESSERS funding across the three pots, the ESSERS 1 that we had for this year, ESSERS 2 that's coming, and then very quickly behind that, ESSERS 3. In ESSERS 3, there is a mandatory set-aside of 20%. I believe that's over $2 million to address specifically learning loss. And so, as you know, anytime we receive pots of money, there are rules about the money. And so with the one pot of money we received back in last July, Ms. Carswell, and we didn't receive the rules until the 1st of December, and they audited us on December 30th. And we had the money for 6 months. And so, you know, that's just sometimes the way it works. In this case, we've begun to get some of the requirements for at least the ESSERS 2 money and what that can be used for. ESSERS 3 money has to be encumbered by September 30th, 2024. And so we have time. It's not like we're going to go out and buy a truckload of stuff, particularly if we're using that funding for personnel, if that's the decision that the board makes. But again, significant money. This money isn't designed in any way to supplant the funding that it takes to run the operation of the school. And so it's going to continue to cost what it's cost to run our school system. And so we still need the support of the county commissioners, and we still need the support of the state, and we still need the support of the federal dollars that we receive on a normal year. We need those dollars just to run the school system. This is over and above and beyond, and an opportunity to address the needs that have been caused by the pandemic. And so I want to share with you, and I apologize for reading to you quite a bit of verbiage on this slide and the next slide, but this is actually from an email I received from Dr. Beth Metcalf, and I thought she really put it pretty well. She's actually our regional support representative from DPI. And so she was reaching out to superintendents and offering to spend time thinking with us if we'd like for her to. And she said this: opportunities for using your ESSER 2 and 3 funds are numerous. And I'll pause there to say that vendors are wearing me out already. Hey, you've got money and we've got stuff. And I can tell you, and the cabinet will tell you, I've said many times, I have no desire to waste money or buy a bunch of stuff that's going to collect dust somewhere. It needs to be spent on our actual needs. But she says the opportunities are numerous with the potential to have a tremendously positive impact on your school systems and communities. It's time to think big, she says. While the funds are temporary, the impact can be permanent. What staffing enhancements can you make for the next 3 years to support learning and teaching? What staffing would support your students' social and emotional needs, especially post-COVID? What professional learning can benefit your teachers and staff as they meet their students' diverse learning needs? What supplies and materials can benefit your schools? What infrastructure and facility needs can you address that may have languished? What has been something that has been needed for your kids but with no way to pay for it? She goes on to say, there are lots of questions to ask during the relatively short grant application timeframe. As you and your team think through your ESSER 2 and 3 funding, you may have to adapt to an unusual mindset. Educators are so used to getting by with so little and creatively scraping together dollars here and there. This is an opportunity to step out of that mindset, even if briefly. What impact could be made if you bring in the right people in the right places with the right resources wherever you can and for as long as you can? And she signs it, Dr. Beth Metcalf. As you may recall, I don't know if anybody was on the board at that time, but at one point we had the Americans Reinvestment Act, the ARA funds that were sent to us by President Obama at the time. When we received those funds, we received funds to help us get through the financial crisis at the time, and school systems across the country received those funds. This was prior to 2000 or around 2008. And what happened was we faced a funding cliff. And so in the school system I served as a principal, one of the things we had to go through was the potential and then the realization of a RIF process, because we had funding through those ARA funds that was temporary, just like this ESSERS funding is. And so certainly being aware of anything that we use the funds for, the funds are temporary and they will be gone once they're spent, and they have to be spent by 2024. However, as Dr. Metcalf says, we have this opportunity we didn't know was coming in terms of the amount to make a difference. Our kids have needs. They've gone through the pandemic and they need what they need. And so we have some funding available. And so that thoughtfulness about being creative in a way we typically aren't is certainly worthwhile in considering. And so as we start to think about the $6 million that's in ESSER 2, one of the things that I've put up as a possibility for the board to consider tonight if you wanted to, can consider next month when we actually look at the entirety of the ESSERS 2 budget as the board would. I really appreciated when board members reached out to me and said multiple times, we'd like to do something for the employees in terms of a stipend for the employees, because we know that this has been hard and unusual, and they've gone overboard in our school system. And I'm quoting board members back to you, and I apologize for quoting back to you, but I want our community to know that this is what I've heard from our board members, that you recognize that men and women who serve our school system have done things in such an incredible fashion that we've been able to be cutting edge with opening our schools. We've been able to keep our schools open. We've been able to be the shining light. We've been asked to speak at the General Assembly because we were operating our schools so well. And that's a tribute and credit to all who serve in our school system. And so as an example, as an approved expense from that ESSERS II funding, certainly an employee stipend could be actually used for this school year, so prior to the end of the school year. And just looking at a budgetary number, if the board desired to do a $500 per employee stipend, the total cost would be $711,000, which is approximately $646 per employee once we take care of the benefits as well. And so certainly something that the board may want to consider. Moving forward and looking at other possibilities, and so what's happening in the background, Ms. McClenny is leading a lot of this work, working in close concert with Ms. Carswell, is reaching out to not only our cabinet members to look across all of our departments, but to our principals as well. We have a principals meeting tomorrow, and we'll be talking about the needs that they've identified. So here are the things that are just kind of on our brainstorming list. So this isn't the budget. It's not even the list of things that may appear next month on the budget for you to consider, just some of the things that we've been thinking about. And so the first thing that's listed is required, and that's the summer learning program. You know, the governor just signed that bill, and that requires, there's a couple of state stipends that are required as part of that bill that we'll need to fund, and the bill specifically says use your ESSERS II funding to fund that. We're actually required to serve all of our students, grades kindergarten through 12th grade, and encourage them to take advantage of that opportunity. We can't require them to take advantage of summer learning. And so there'll be some costs there with the cost of salaries, the cost of those stipends that are required for those teachers who've earned national board certification or who've earned a reading or math bonus in the past. Chromebook replacement. You know, one of the big ticket items from our county commissioners over the last 5 years has been the yearly lease cost. And so we've had a 5-year lease. We're actually entering into the 5th year of that 5-year lease. And so in our cabinet meeting, working with Mr. McKay and our team, we talked about, well, one of the things we might want to do is to replace our Chromebooks and then have 5 years where we're not paying for technology because we've used this ESSERS II funding. And so what that might look like is going into next year, that's year 5 of our lease. So year 1 would be 22-23. If we purchase 3,500 Chromebooks that year, and then year 2, which would be the following year, 4,500 Chromebooks, that's about $2.7 million. But what that would do in terms of not just buying them all at one time is that 5 years from then, when you needed to replace them, you wouldn't need to replace 8,000. You know, you'd have the opportunity to plan for that replacement cost working with the commissioners. Another item we've talked about is into math curriculum support. You've heard from principals and others how universally received the into reading curriculum support was this year, as we were able to share that with our schools, teachers sharing how much they appreciated having a common curriculum support across the district. Foundations is another curriculum support opportunity that is being used in some of our schools, and rolling that out across the district is something that has been requested. As you know, we have requirements for class size in grades K-3. This coming year is the last year as we've continued to reduce that class size. So for example, going into next year, first grade is 16. The limit is 16 students per first grade teacher. That's great, but I remember days when it was 30. And so what's happened though is that we're required to keep class size small, grades K, kindergarten through 3rd grade, which is great, but there's no requirement for grades 4th grade through high school. And so what we've seen across the state is those grade levels, those class sizes actually beginning to rise as districts have had to balance the requirement for the lower grades. And so placing them throughout the district at all school levels, but to use in the classrooms in the area of being an instructional assistant. So not folks to run the copier, but to actually sit down and work with reading groups and actually spend time at a student's elbow helping them. One of the ongoing requests that has been in place, is certainly something I've heard about many times since I've been here, and I'm sure you have, but it's been in place since probably the funding cliff and the ARA funds I referenced earlier, was the instructional assistant furlough days. And so that may be an item that the board would like to consider as part of the ESSERS II funding. Other items we have on our list is the thought about adding additional guidance counselors at our middle and high schools to reduce that caseload so they can work with our students, not just in helping them choose classes, but actually be a guidance counselor and helping them work through some life issues that they're going through. Additional EC teachers to help in our exceptional children's program, additional AIG teachers. I know that there have been speakers during some of our budget process asking for that, so that may be a possibility. Virtual learning, we looked at those numbers and how large they are currently. 1,100 students would be about the largest school in the school system. And so thinking about the positions that it might take to have a separate virtual program and then someone to make sure that we're doing all we need to do there, a director, principal type position. And so that may be a possibility. Behavioral support, increasing folks there. And then the thought about using some air ionizers, if that would be a good use of funds to just ensure that we're doing everything we can from a safety standpoint. And so I've really gone through just a litany of ideas. And so what I'd like to do, Mr. Chairman, is to invite the board to share any of your thinking or ask any questions you'd like, and then we will use that feedback along with what we'll receive from the principals and our leadership teams through the principals to bring back a budget in May. Again, this is a rocket fast process, but that's what's been put upon us. And so I apologize for that. One of the things we have been told is you can always go back and amend the budget later. So we know that's also a possibility, as we tend to have to do. And so, Mr. Chair, certainly invited to any board comment that you'd like.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Anybody have any comments or questions?
I do, Dr. Jackson. I love the idea of some further reducing class sizes and adding additional staff, teacher assistants, AIG teachers, the whole works. That's awesome. But how would we tackle funding that after the ESSERS money is gone?
Thank you for asking that question, Mr. Day, and I very much appreciate it, because that's one of the things we've really grappled with, because just like this board has had conversations about how terrible it is to fund recurring expenses with non-recurring dollars, these are non-recurring dollars.
Right.
They're here one time and gone. And so the answer to that is there's two solutions. One is a RIF process. So potentially hiring contractual folks through a contractor, or folks come in on a contract and just saying, look, we may love you, Ms. Smith, but at the end of your contract's over and we don't have money for you and the contract's over. So that RIF process is one opportunity, or the contractual process. The RIF process certainly would be a possibility. The third possibility is attrition. We certainly know that we've got ongoing retirements and resignations, and right-sizing the school system would be something we would have to do. And so the question is right on the money, and probably the biggest question the board has to grapple with right now is whether to put the money into personnel. I would share with you, as you know, the greatest expense in our budget, about 85% typically, is in personnel, because the strength of our school system is personnel. It's not stuff, it's not buses, it's not equipment, it's personnel. And so if we want to move the needle for student success, typically we move the needle with personnel, but it begs that question, okay, well, what about 3 years from now when the funding's gone? And so if the board decided that's where we want to go, I do believe we'd get a return for our investment, which is certainly worthy of some consideration. You know, where are we going to get the most bang for our buck? But I would take that with the guidance that we've got to land the plane after that 3 years and make sure that we're doing that with as little gnashing of teeth as possible. And so this conversation certainly makes Mr. Probst very nervous, because he has to do a lot of that work. But that would be what we would look at, is going forward past any hiring because of the ESSERS funding, and really thoughtful and considerate of where are we going to be in terms of when we hit that funding cliff. Now, the possibility that's out there, and, you know, I don't want to make budget plans on pipe dreams, but Carteret County is growing. I've just barely got moved into my house and had somebody want to buy it. And I haven't even got unpacked yet because so many people are trying to move into Carteret County, which is also a credit to our school system. And so the more students we have, the more positions are generated by the state. And so that may be helpful as well. But your question's right on the money. It's probably the biggest question of the evening.
And it could, at the very least, be helpful. You talk about the contract teaching and so forth, but I guess once we see our end of grade testing and kind of see where our students are, we may need some additional teaching and so forth and assistance to address the learning loss, depending on how much we have. So I can see even in the short term, I hate to kind of tease everybody with the smaller class sizes and more assistance and more AIG teachers, but it may be necessary if the learning loss is substantial.
That's exactly right. And you may have noticed that I shared with you that the two individuals leading this work are our Chief Academic Officer and our Chief Finance Officer for that very purpose. The focus of our school system is our students' academic success. And so having our Chief Academic Officer really lead that work along with our Chief Finance Officer, because we want to do this thing the right way, is extremely important. And certainly that data would be what would be absolutely crucial to use, because we don't want to hire folks who we're not getting a whole lot out of. We want to hire the folks we need. If that's the way the board goes.
I agree with everything you said. I don't like the idea of contractual employees because at the end of the term, we lose it. But I totally agree with what you said as far as looking at maybe some of the loss areas and bolstering that. But I do think it's incredibly important that anything that we do that's going to be recurring funds, that we're working with the commissioners so they understand our plan and they know at the end of a certain period we may be asking for more. So.
And thank you for that. I really do appreciate that. I think we have to work extremely closely with the county manager and with the commissioners so they also have an understanding that we have this one-time opportunity to deal with the needs that we have at this time because of the pandemic. Now, while the money is not there to supplant anything that we currently receive, where there are opportunities to help out, like, for example, the technology, being able to say for 5 years, we're not going to need at least payment for technology because we could use this ESSERS 2 money. And that certainly would be helpful with all of our students. That may be a way to help the county. Anytime we can help the county, that serves all of us very well. And so we'd want to do that. We just have to be mindful that we continue to operate within the rules.
Well, and I know a couple of the commissioners have mentioned several times about trying to recognize our employees for what an outstanding job the system does. And so I'd like to see us try to blend some of this money in with what they were talking about. So I think there are a lot of options. I don't know that I would be ready to vote on anything tonight unless somebody wants to make a motion. So
I've got a question about the summer learning program.
Yes, ma'am.
How many weeks is that going to be and what is the cost of that?
So the cost is to be determined, unfortunately. We've just gotten that bill signed, I believe, last week, and just really begun to dig deep into the bill. So we've been planning all along.
Right.
But the summer learning program requires things we've not been required before. So one example is enrichment activities, whether that's PE, music, art. Typically, that's not part of a summer school program, but it's now required. We're required to have social emotional learning support and trying to figure out, okay, what is that going to look like? We're required to have physical activity K-8 and making that determination about what that is. In terms of the exact timing, what they've said is 150 hours, I believe, Ms. McClenny, for the summer learning program. I actually had a webinar this morning at 7:30 for superintendents on summer learning. We were asking those questions. And so the 150 hours are for each student in each grade level. We can't say, well, we've got 75 for elementary and 75 for high school, and there's 150. We have, from the outset, when it was first talked about, we heard from teachers. Teachers are tired after a hard year, and trying to make sure we have teachers and high-quality teachers is extremely important. And so we've talked about the possibility that we might even look at a job share model. So if it's a 6-week program, maybe one teacher teaches 3 weeks and another teacher teaches 3 weeks, and then both teachers are willing to teach 3 weeks, but maybe not 6 weeks. And if that helps us get a higher quality teacher in the room, we'll certainly have that. And so to answer your question, it's really difficult at this moment yet. We are required to have a meal as part of the summer program. Now, we do summer feeding anyway, and we don't yet understand how those two things will dovetail, whether summer feeding takes care of the meal or it has to be something separate from our summer feeding, and that's yet to be determined. And so a lot of that expense, because we've literally just gotten that legislation within the last week, is yet to be determined. And then, of course, quite a bit of it will be dependent on how many students and families take advantage of it. We're not allowed to require it, but we are required to advertise it and to encourage parents to take advantage of it. And so the numbers of students taking advantage of it will drive the cost as well.
And we will offer it to all who are interested.
Yes, sir.
Optional. Will it be required for those students who maybe did not pass end of course grades?
No, sir. They were clear that we can't require it. Now, I'm confident, and Ms. Z is still here, that every one of our principals and all of our teachers will be doing all they can to strongly encourage those children who need to be there to really take advantage of that opportunity, but we're not allowed to require it.
Dr. Jackson, I really like this list. I think that on this list, there's things that we've talked about over and over and over again that are needs. I don't think I'm ready to necessarily vote on all of these things tonight. I think that that's a really, really great list, but I'd like to speak a little more in depth maybe later on about this. But there is one thing that I can say that I am for, and that is the COVID employee stipend. I can't think of a better thing to add into our ESSERS 2 funding. Our teachers have worked tirelessly, and I can't think of a better way than to give them a big thanks for all they've done this year. They've flopped back and forth between plans and schedules, and they've made it work. And we've done really, really well. And like you said, we are at the front of we're at the front of the line. So that's something that I can definitely hang my hat on. But I would like a little more time on the other things.
And sort of expounding on Brittany's, not only have we asked them to do what they've done to this point, everything we're going to ask them to do moving forward. I mean, this is not over just because we've gone to plan A. We've got a lot of remediation and a lot of care and a lot of thoughtfulness to give to our children. And in my opinion, it's the least we could do.
Can you pull that out? You want to make a motion?
Yes, can we actually pull? Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Is that for just teachers or is this all employees? Because we've got,
So the Board of Education can do anything the Board of Education wants to do. As we talked about it at the cabinet level, and again, I just, and should the board move forward with something like this, I'll do my best to communicate to every single person in our school system that this idea generation literally was from our Board of Education. And I appreciate that so much. As your superintendent charged with working with you, I appreciate that. So our conversation, Ms. Statler, and the board, again, can do anything you want to do, is we know every single person has worked so very hard, whether it's the bus driver delivering meals, had the opportunity to do that right before spring break, or the person in the cafeteria, or the teacher teaching the class, or the administration. And so this is, as this is set up as an example, and Mike, if you'll flip back to that slide, it's actually $500 per person, regardless of their actual job classification. Now, the board can do anything the board wants to do. But that was, as an example, that's how we pulled that out.
I'm sorry, I think that was my confusion. I think I said teacher and I didn't mean to say
that's
teacher.
perfect.
I meant
Because
employee.
I know we have bookkeepers working on Saturday making COVID calls. So I just wanted to make sure that was an all-inclusive. And the only other comment I had was something that we said not voting on tonight, but before we're looking at adding instructional assistants, which I agree is a great idea, I really strongly want to get behind eliminating the current assistants furlough days before we bring new ones in. We wouldn't have made it through the last year without our assistants and the bus drivers, and I would like to pay respect to them first by eliminating those furlough days if possible.
I agree with Katie on
I
that.
do too.
Mr. Chair, can I make a motion
You sure may.
that we go ahead and approve $500 per employee of the Carteret County school system using ESSERS money? And that 500 is net, as I understand it.
That would be gross.
That is gross.
No,
Okay.
the gross was the 646 and the net's the 500.
The 646 is our matching employer benefits that we have to pay.
I beg your
on
pardon.
top of it.
Okay, that's fine. that this 500 come out of ESSER's and that we go ahead and approve it because they've got 6 more weeks of instructional learning to go, and we want to let them know how much we appreciate all their hard work, and this way they can hear it now rather than later. That's my motion.
I've got a motion by Reverend Goodwin.
Go ahead, let him finish this motion and I'll jump in too, Kathy. Go ahead.
I'd like,
You have a second?
I'd like to second that motion.
I've got a second by Ms. Wheatley.
Mr. Chair, if I may, as you move to discussion, I might ask the board to consider that in anything like this, there's always many minor decisions to make. For example, is this full-time employees, part-time employees, or some sort of prorated piece? Does this include volunteer coaches, all of that sort of thing? And so the board could delegate that decision, that level of decision-making to the superintendent, the superintendent's cabinet, and we can take care of those decisions, or we can bring those questions up because the cabinet's going, what about this? What about this? So, very wisely. That's why we have the cabinet. We appreciate them. But, and so if that's amenable to the board, we'll do our best to make the decisions that you'd want us to make with those details. Does that satisfy what you wanted to ask about, Kathy?
Is that amenable to the board?
That is, and I'm assuming you would confer with principals, especially if it's a part-time person that gets paid for 10 hours, been working 25, and
Absolutely.
Okay, so everybody's good. We're all on the same page. Everybody feels good. Perfect. We've got a first and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. Any opposed? No opposed. It passes unanimously. I appreciate that.
And
Thank you to
the only thing that I would like to add, and I think everybody would agree, is that we still try to use some of this ESSER's 2 money and marry it with other potential money in the county to do something more permanent.
Absolutely.
This isn't a one-time.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a one-time payment, a stipend, but as long as we can still work towards something more permanent.
Absolutely. Very good. Anything else, Dr. Jackson?
Just, is there any more input from the board in terms of, and we're continuing the budget planning process, and so we got one item in the ESSER's 2 budget, thank you. If there's any more input, then we'll be happy to take that, and if not, we'll continue to work on that budget piece.
Dr. Jackson, I know some of us have talked about, and maybe it's being addressed with guidance counselors, but the mental, emotional health of our students and our staff. Is that being addressed in guidance counselors, or is there another way? Because
So
we know it's very serious.
the answer is everybody who wears a school system name badge is helping to address that because everyone's involved in that work, as pervasive as you know it is. We do have school social workers. We use mental health therapists. We actually have 2 contractors who are helping provide those services. And so certainly considering that as a potential need or a possibility for expenses is something for us to continue to look at.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. McClain?
Dr. Jackson, can you just talk briefly about eliminating the instructional assistant furlough days, what that means financially to us potentially?
Absolutely. So eliminating the teacher assistant furlough days, and as I actually inquired about the teacher assistant furlough days that we have as we were going through the calendar process, that actually predates all of the cabinet members being on the cabinet in terms of when it started. And so it appears that became a solution as the funding cliff from the ARA funds arrived. One of the ways the board dealt with in the past, the one-time money, was, okay, we'll have this furlough of teacher assistants and we'll furlough them for 5 days a year. And as I believe I know, that was not intended to be an ongoing permanent solution. It was intended to be a temporary solution, but it costs money to fix that. And so the money to fix that is between $70,000 and $100,000, but that's an annual cost. And so we just have to be recognize that as much as I've heard board members say we want to fix it, as much as I know I want to fix it, we just have to be prepared to handle that on a recurring basis. And whether that's by right-sizing the system going forward, based on our student numbers past the ESSERS funding or the system growing. We just have to know that that's a possibility. I can tell you as an aside, as your superintendent, I absolutely support that as an important budgetary item. One board member said earlier, we want to take care of the folks who've been here taking care of our kids even before we start to bring in others, because we certainly value those who've been here and been loyal and dedicated to our children. And so that's certainly an opportunity and something I greatly support. It is a potential possible budget item as we've looked at it for the ESSERS 2 funding. But it would be something, again, as you mentioned earlier, we'd want to mention to the county commissioners that it might become an ongoing expense that would require either more funding coming in or fewer teacher assistants if we didn't grow the number of students. And so I don't know if I've answered your
No,
question.
you have. I think that we're all on the same page, but we want to see the big picture, how everything's shaking out before we would make any kind of decisions.
And was that potentially done? I know it was done to save money, obviously. So it could have been, hey, we lose a teacher position or everybody's furloughed 5 days. And I don't know how it actually works out mathematically, but that's kind of the situation we were in, I'm assuming, way back.
So I can't speak to what happened exactly in Carteret County, but I can speak to what was happening in North Carolina. And that's very much what was happening, that districts were making decisions about furloughing full-time employees back to 30 hours instead of 40 hours, and to do that across the district, or to take 2 hours away so that you didn't have to let go of a position. So one of the ways that the district might have said, we'll keep the number of teacher assistants we have, is by taking 5 days from all teacher assistants going forward. And so I can't speak to exactly the decision that was made here. That's actually, as I believe, my predecessor's predecessor's predecessor that was a part of that conversation. But anyway, that was happening across the state. And again, that was funding cliff from the ARA funds.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other thoughts or questions? Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Jackson.
And on behalf of the staff, thank you, board members, for that decision. I very much appreciate it, and I'll do my best to know that they know where that idea came from, and that we do appreciate our Board of Education. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now I will read a little, give you some information regarding the appointment to the Carteret Community College Board of Trustees. As you are aware, the Carteret County Board of Education is responsible for appointing 4 people to the Carteret Community College Board of Trustees. These are 4-year appointments. The following individuals are currently serving on the CCC Board of Trustees as Board of Education appointments. Catherine Parker, term to expire June 30th, 2021. Dr. Matt Zeidel, term to expire June 30th, 2022. William Bill Henderson, term to expire June 30th, 2023, and Robin Comer, term to expire June 30th, 2024. The Board of Education will be asked at its June 8th, 2021 meeting to appoint a person for the term that ends June 30th, 2021. The Board of Education will follow the procedure of advertising. For that reason, I am announcing tonight at the April 13th, 2021 Board of Education meeting that letters of interest are due to the superintendent's office to my attention by 5 p.m. on the first Tuesday of May, which will be May 4th, 2021. And now we will move on to Mr. Richie Paler on projects update.
Good evening. I have 2 updates for you for the bond projects. The first is the doors at Atlantic Elementary, Harkins Island Elementary, and Westcott High School have all been measured and have been ordered. We're told it's going to be about a 4 to 6 weeks wait time on those doors to be manufactured. We're told that it could be as much as 8 to 12 weeks on some of the hardware because it's going to take longer to get that. But that process is underway for the doors, and hopefully that'll be completed early summer. The second project was the Newport Elementary School cafeteria roof replacement. Right now, we're awaiting bids, and those bids are due next Tuesday. So once the bid closes, we'll be moving forward with that project and getting underway. Lastly, I'd like to thank you for approving the Height Associates architect firm to worked with us through the bond projects that was approved tonight. And I look forward to working with Mr. Height and Mr. Moretti and getting those projects started. And Mr. Moretti and I have done a lot of groundwork already in getting some pre-work. So we're hoping to hit the ground running as early as tomorrow and getting some of the major projects looked at. So hopefully in the next few months, we'll have some maybe even some renderings for you to look at some new projects.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paler. Great job. Next, we have got some comments from Dr. Jackson. You're up again.
Much tonight, but thank you very much. Board members, as I begin my comments, I'd like to direct your attention to the screens for a special message and presentation. Mike. Hi, I'm Superintendent Rob Jackson. I am incredibly delighted to be standing here with my friend, Reverend Oden, because Reverend Oden has an incredible gift that's being presented today to our school system, a gift that commemorates our very important history. Reverend Oden, tell us about this gift.
Yes, this is the history of Queen Street School from 1928 to 1968. It came from out of Washburn Seminary, which was from the American Missionary Association that came from New York and started a school. And at the end of around 1928, that school burned. And so they built the Queen Street School. And first it was from first grade to 11. 1947, they added 12th grade. It was a very good school. It had all type of programs, sent many doctors, lawyers, very good teachers and other professionals. Reginald Hawkins, who was a civil rights advocate, he ran for governor twice and ran in 2 runoffs. He was one of those, and of course, the author of this book was Dr. Linwood Davis, and a native professor at Winston-Salem State University, and got his doctorate from Carnegie Mellon. And again, he traveled all over the world, one of the best renowned, had over 150 articles. And this is truly a very in-depth history of the Queen Street School. And it tells you about all the increments of Louis Detroit, Victoria, the different clubs. I went to school there from K to 8, and then went to East Carter in the first integrated school. But this is a great resource that I think that will be very telling about the history of Queen Street School.
Absolutely. Reverend Oden, I just so much appreciate this, particularly coming from an alumni of the school, because our history, our shared history is so very important that we really understand where we've been, because if we don't know where we've been, we might wind up right back there.
Right.
And so being able to celebrate the incredible accomplishments of the school itself, of the alumni of the school, of the principals. I've enjoyed reading about the principals and their teachers, and just greatly appreciate this gift. Reverend Odom, through the family, is actually providing enough copies that we will have a copy of this book in all of our middle schools and our high schools and our Beaufort schools. It'll be in the reference section, and we are just absolutely delighted. Thank you so very much for this incredible gift.
And thank you, and we also thank Ms. Jane Davis, who donated on behalf of the late Dr.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Davis, and we certainly appreciate the work of Dr. Davis, whose picture's on the back of the book, and commemorating through this book the many, many lives that were touched by Queen Street School. Reverend Odom, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'd like to again thank Reverend Curtis Oden for helping to facilitate the donation of the books. I actually have a copy with me here. Those will be placed in the reference sections of our middle school and high schools. And reading about the history of any school that served children in this county is always incredibly fascinating and very rewarding. And so we certainly appreciate that. Those were received in memory of Dr. Linwood Davis, who's actually the author, graduated from our school system many years ago. The month of April brings National Assistant Principals Week, National Autism Awareness Month, School Library Month, Keep America Beautiful Month, and the Month of the Military Child. Thank you, board members, for recognizing our military-connected children and families earlier this evening. Speaking of that, tomorrow at 10 a.m., the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction will recognize every single school in our school system with a Purple Heart Award for the school's work in supporting military-connected children and families. Less than 10% of the schools in the state achieve this honor. In addition, the Carteret County Public Schools system will receive the North Carolina State Superintendent's Purple Star District Award, one of only 8 school systems in the entire state to earn the district award. I'm very proud of the efforts in each of our schools and our school system to serve the children and families of those who so ably serve each of us through military service. I'd like to again congratulate the Croatan High School men's soccer team for winning the state championship. Mr. Paler, County Athletic Director Al Robertson, and myself enjoyed representing our school system and cheering on the Cougars at the state championship. It was an exhilarating overtime win over an previously undefeated opponent. The championship game capped an undefeated season by the Cougars. With very few seniors on the team may be able to make another run next year, the coach tells me. The board will have the opportunity to recognize the team at next month's board meeting. Prior to spring break, I had the opportunity to join child nutrition staff members in delivering meals to students for spring break. As we drove across the county, my heart soared at every single stop when quite literally parents, grandparents, and children, every single one, gave a heartfelt thank you for the food every single time. Their gratitude for the small gift of food truly reminded me of the purpose of our work and how very important the work of the school system is. Families count on our schools, and our schools deliver every single time. Recently, I received a letter from the North Carolina Public Schools Deputy Superintendent, Dr. David Stegall, commending our school system's AIG program. In the letter, he states, quote, "Congratulations, the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction's Division of Advanced Learning and Gifted Education is pleased to highlight your district's AIG program as a promising practice for North Carolina's Call to Action for Equity and Excellence strategic initiative. Your district is highlighted in the resource titled Call to Action Guidebook and on our coordinator's website. I'm extremely proud of our work in serving every single student in our school system." As we approach the last 6 weeks of this school year, I am mindful of the incredible accomplishments of this year to date, as we've talked about this evening. From leading the state and safely opening schools, to passing a school bond, to providing high-quality instructional opportunities during a pandemic, to doing all that we can to keep every student and staff member safe. I'm so very incredibly proud of our team and of your leadership. Much work remains. Decisions will be required to finish this year and to move into the 2021-2022 school year, but I know that we will continue to provide a beacon of leading and learning for Carteret County, just as we always have. I can assure you that we have been, we are, and we will remain Carteret strong. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my comments this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Any board members have any comments, thoughts? Mr. Gay?
In addition to congratulating Croatan High School boys soccer team, that's awesome. I love it. So kudos to you guys. Wonderful. We need a lot more of those types of things. And with all the COVID stupidness, craziness, it was nice to see a little teeny bit of normalcy and people having a good time and really cheering on their team. So that's awesome. I also did want to acknowledge those governor's school honorees. That is an incredible honor. And it's a big sacrifice, too, for students who maybe are living at the beach, and they're going to give up 5.5, 6 weeks, or they think they're going to give up 5.5, 6 weeks of their summertime to go be in school for that amount of time for governor's school. But it's a great honor, and it's a great experience, and you won't be sorry. So congratulations.
Any other thoughts or comments? Fantastic. I guess it comes down to me. I would also like to congratulate Croatan. Their soccer championship, I had the opportunity to go to one of the games, and I played soccer growing up through high school, and I thought I was a pretty decent player, but watching those guys, they just are phenomenal. And I'm very proud to be part of this community that got to witness that. I do want to point out, though, that those kids, they had something to work for this year. They had a championship to work for. The governor's school kids had something, that's their championship. We've got thousands of kids in our county, who don't have that championship to work for. And I want us to be cognizant of that. I want us to work every day to help them find that championship, whether it's in the next 6 weeks or going into next year. We need to help every kid in our school system find a championship, no matter what it is. We need to build their confidence and help them find their way. That's going to be imperative. And we have, Dr. Jackson is very humble. He sits there and says, the board, it's our idea to come up with this stipend for the employees of the school system. We work together. It's beautiful what goes on here. We have got an incredible central office, and it's not us. It's all of us. It's not the board. It's all of us. And I'm so truly appreciative that I get this. It's been a stressful year sitting right here, but I get the opportunity to sit here with these great board members and this great staff at central office. So thank y'all so much. So, with that said,
Clark, I'm sorry, so sorry. I think there was one more comment.
Hey, I was
Sorry,
hoping you were
Catherine.
going to put in a plug for Shine the Light, the school.
Oh,
You're fired, you're fired.
Saving her for last because she's very important.
The school foundation, who is all staffed with volunteers, there's no paid employees. We are having our first annual fundraising event on Tuesday, May 11th. There's details on the Facebook page, or will be. So we have tickets and we're rounding up silent auction items. And I also wanted to say congratulations to Josh for his national award. That's amazing. And then I have one other thing. I noticed that pre-K and kindergarten are doing like online registration. Is there a way that we can open up our gyms to have kids come in? Because we've opened up our gyms for sporting events. I mean,
So Ms. McClenny may want to provide additional details, but we're also doing a drive-up registration. Some of our families
At all our
aren't comfortable
schools,
coming
or-
in.
okay, awesome.
Yes,
When I
ma'am.
saw the online thing, I was like, oh, that's kind of stealing the thunder for children. And, you know, I feel like at times we're doing a disservice to our schools by not letting families into the schools, you know, all the things we took for granted. So I'm glad to hear that there's a drive-through. Great. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Chadwick. Anybody else?
Sorry.
Fantastic. I think, oh, you're good. I think we've got to go into a closed session, so I need a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Got a motion from Mr. Day. Do I have a second? Second. Reverend Goodwin.
Mr. Jenkins, if you wouldn't mind, could we amend the motion to include the statutory reference for closed session?
Yes. We need to amend. Do I
Just
have a
add it
motion to amend the,
Pursuant to GS 143-318, 11A.
11A6 is for personnel matters.
yes, for personnel matters. My bad.
That's what Travis meant to say, and that's what I meant to say.
Okay.
Ditto what he said.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. Very good. We're in closed
Thank you.
session.
Getting late.